When we look back on the past year, it's easy to be overwhelmed by the losses we've experienced, whether they be in relationships, health, finances, or even dreams that we once held close to our hearts. The weight of loss can often cloud our vision, making it hard to see a way forward, much less the hope of restoration. But I stand before you today with a message of hope, a message that reminds us of the unchanging truth. God will restore everything you have lost. In the depths of our struggles, we may sometimes forget that God is a God of restoration. It is not His desire for us to remain in a state of brokenness, despair, or discouragement. No matter how dark the road may seem, God has always been in the business of restoration. From the beginning of time, He has been working to bring His people back from the brink of destruction. And though we may not always understand His timing, we must hold fast to the promise that He will make all things new in His perfect way. We know that God is a God who works all things together for the good of those who love Him, who are called according to His purpose. This truth is not merely a comforting thought or an abstract idea. It is the very foundation upon which we stand when facing the pain of loss. When we feel like we have been stripped of everything, when we believe that we have nothing left to offer, God is right there, waiting to restore us in ways we never thought possible. Let us turn to the Scriptures, for it is in the Word of God that we find the promises that speak directly to our souls. In the book of Joel, God declares, "I will restore to you the years that the swarming locust has eaten." Joel 2:25. Think about that for a moment. The people of Israel had endured a devastating loss. Their land had been ravaged, their crops destroyed, and their hearts broken. Yet in the midst of their sorrow, God promises restoration. Not just a small portion of what they lost, but a full and complete restoration. God is telling us that He can and will restore what we have lost, no matter how great or small it may seem. But let us not miss the significance of that promise. God didn't say He would simply give them back what they lost. He said He would restore the years that had been taken from them. You see, restoration is not just about returning to the way things were. It is about bringing something even better, something more beautiful out of the ashes of what we have lost. When God restores, He does not merely give back. He multiplies. What we thought was lost forever can be transformed into something greater in His hand. The truth is, loss is a part of life. We cannot escape it. Jesus Himself warned us that in this world we will face trials and tribulations. We will experience heartache, disappointment, and grief. But He didn't stop there. He also gave us this promise: "Take heart, I have overcome the world." John 16:33. Jesus overcame the world, and because of His victory, we can have hope that our losses are not final. We can trust that God in His sovereignty will use even our most difficult circumstances to bring about His purposes. One of the greatest examples of restoration in Scripture is the story of Job. Job was a man who experienced unimaginable loss. He lost his wealth, his health, and even his family. He was a man who had everything taken from him, and in his suffering, he asked the question we all ask in moments of loss: why? Why, God, would you allow such pain? Why would you allow me to lose everything? But through it all, Job never gave up on his faith. He never turned away from God, even though he didn't understand why he was suffering. And in the end, God restored to Job everything he had lost and more. Job's latter days were more blessed than his former days. He was given twice as much wealth, and he had more children than before. But even more than the material blessings, Job was restored in his relationship with God. Through his trials, Job came to a deeper understanding of who God is and the power of his restoration. The story of Job is not just a story of material restoration. It is a story of spiritual renewal. God restored Job's faith, his trust, and his hope. In the midst of suffering, Job learned to surrender his questions, his doubts, and his pain to God. And in doing so, he experienced a restoration that went beyond anything he could have imagined. God took his brokenness and transformed it into something beautiful. I know that many of us today are walking through our own seasons of loss. We have experienced things that have left us feeling empty, defeated, and unsure of the future. Perhaps we've lost loved ones, faced illness, struggled in our careers, or encountered unexpected trials. The pain is real, and it is deeply felt. But I want you to hear me clearly. God sees you. He knows the depth of your sorrow, and he promises to restore what has been taken from you. Restoration may not always come in the way we expect it. It may not look like a return to the way things were before, but I assure you it will be better. God has a way of working all things for good, even when we cannot see the path ahead. In his perfect timing, he will restore your joy, your peace, your strength, and your hope. And he will do it in a way that glorifies his name and fulfill his purpose in your life. We must remember that restoration is not just about receiving back what we lost. It is about trusting in God's plan and his ability to bring beauty from the brokenness. It is about learning to let go of the things we cannot control and surrendering our lives to the one who holds all things in his hands. God's restoration is not just a temporary fix. It is a lasting transformation. When God restores, he makes all things new. The Apostle Paul, in his letter to the Romans, reminds us that we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Romans 8:28. This is the truth we must cling to in times of loss. Even when we cannot see how God is working, we can trust that he is always working for our good. His plans for us are always better than anything we could imagine. He is not only a God who restores, he is a God who redeems. The restoration God promises is not just for the things we have lost, it is for our very souls. In the midst of our pain, we can find peace in knowing that God is doing a work in us. He is shaping us, refining us, and preparing us for something greater. The losses we experience are not meaningless. They are part of God's greater purpose for our lives. He uses the trials of life to draw us closer to him, to deepen our faith, and to increase our dependence on his grace. As we look ahead to the coming year, we can do so with a sense of hope and expectation. Whatever you may have lost in the past year, I encourage you to believe that God will restore it. He will restore your health, your relationships, your finances, and your dreams. And even if the restoration is not immediate, trust that God is working behind the scenes, preparing something far greater than you can see. So let us hold on to the promise of restoration. Let us trust in God's faithfulness, knowing that he will bring back to us everything that was lost. And as we wait for his restoration, may we continue to walk in faith, knowing that God's timing is perfect and his love is unending. No matter what we face, we can have confidence that God is with us and he will restore everything we have lost in his perfect way and time. As we stand in the midst of life's battles, it's crucial that we keep our hearts open to the possibility of restoration. While it is easy to become consumed by the weight of our losses, we must recognize that there is a greater plan unfolding beyond what we can see. God has a purpose in the pain, and it is a purpose that is often revealed. This process may not always be immediate, and it may not always take the form we expect. But one thing is certain, God is faithful. His restoration is not limited by our human understanding or by the circumstances we face. His ability to restore is limitless, and his desire to restore us is steadfast. While we may encounter seasons of brokenness, these seasons are not the end of the story. They are the beginning of a greater work that God is doing in our lives. When we lose something, it is easy to feel like we are left with nothing. We grieve what has been taken from us, whether it be our health, our financial security, our relationships, or even our sense of purpose. The emptiness we feel in these moments can be overwhelming. But in the very midst of our emptiness, God begins his work of restoration. God is in the business of rebuilding, repairing, and renewing. Just as he restored Job after his incredible suffering, so too will he restore us. Job's story serves as a powerful reminder that even in our darkest moments, God is still working. We may not understand the reasons behind our suffering, but we can trust that he is shaping us, refining us, and preparing us for what is to come. Job's restoration did not come in the form of a return to his former life. Instead, it came as a deeper relationship with God and a greater understanding of his power and sovereignty. Restoration often requires us to go through a process of surrender. When we experience loss, it can be tempting to hold on to our pain and to allow it to define us. We may try to numb the hurt with distractions or to control the outcome, but true restoration only comes when we are willing to let go and trust that God has a better plan. It is in the surrendering of our pain and our desires that God is able to do his greatest work in us. He takes our brokenness and turns it into something beautiful. One of the most profound aspects of God's restoration is his ability to redeem not just our circumstances, but our hearts. Sometimes the greatest loss we face is not the loss of material things or relationships, but the loss of hope. We become so consumed by our pain that we lose sight of the promises that God has spoken over our lives. But even in these moments, God is faithful to restore our hope. He brings healing to the deepest wounds of our hearts, and he fills us with a renewed sense of purpose. When we experience loss, it is natural to grieve. Grief is a part of the human experience, and it is a necessary process for healing. But while we grieve, we must also remember that grief does not have to be the end of the story. God is near to the brokenhearted, and he promises to comfort us in our pain. He does not leave us in our sorrow. He enters into it with us, and in his presence there is healing. There is a beautiful truth found in the Psalms that speaks to the heart of God's restoration. In Psalm 34:18, we are reminded, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." This is not just a comforting thought, it is a declaration of God's love and faithfulness. God is close to you in your pain. He sees your tears, and he understands the depth of your loss. But more than that, he is committed to restoring you. Restoration begins with a change of perspective. When we focus solely on what we have lost, it becomes difficult to see the opportunities for restoration that are before us. Our pain can blind us to the goodness of God and the new things he is doing in our lives. But when we shift our focus to the one who holds all things together, we begin to see that even in the midst of loss, there is hope. God is not finished with you yet. His plans for you are still unfolding, and his restoration is already in motion. Throughout the Bible, we see numerous examples of God's people experiencing loss and then witnessing his powerful restoration. In the book of Ruth, we find the story of a woman who lost her husband and her way. Ruth's life seemed to be filled with hopelessness, yet God used her pain to bring about a beautiful redemption. Through her faithfulness, God restored her hope and placed her in the lineage of David, the great king of Israel. Ruth's story serves as a reminder that God's restoration often comes through unexpected means. Similarly, we see the story of the prodigal son in the New Testament. The son squandered his inheritance and found himself in the depths of despair, longing for a way out of his brokenness. But his father, filled with compassion, welcomed him home with open arms, restoring him to his rightful place in the family. The Father's actions are a powerful picture of God's heart for us. No matter how far we may have strayed, God is always ready to welcome us back and to restore us to the place he has designed for us. The beauty of God's restoration is that it is not just about returning to what we once had. It is about moving forward into something greater. God does not merely patch up the broken pieces of our lives and send us on our way. Instead, he transforms us, renewing our hearts, minds, and spirits. His restoration is a process of making us whole, of bringing us into alignment with his will for our lives. Through the process of restoration, we are shaped into the people God has created us to be. As we wait for God's restoration in our own lives, it is important to remember that his timing is perfect. It is easy to become impatient, especially when we feel the weight of our losses pressing down on us. But we must trust that God's timing is always right. He is not slow in fulfilling his promises. Rather, he is patient, desiring that we come to a deeper understanding of his goodness and faithfulness. His timing is always designed to bring about the most complete and lasting restoration. There are times when we may feel like we are being held in a season of waiting. We pray for restoration, yet the circumstances seem unchanged. But even in the waiting, God is at work. The waiting period is not a time of inactivity. It is a time of preparation. During these times, God is refining us, building our faith, and teaching us to trust in his plan. Waiting is a necessary part of the process of restoration, for it allows us to develop patience and endurance. In the book of Isaiah, we read of God's promise to those who wait on him, that they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Isaiah 40:31. This is a beautiful promise of renewal, of strength for the journey. When we wait on the Lord, he empowers us to keep moving forward, even when the road is difficult. It is in the waiting that we learn to trust, not in our own abilities, but in God's perfect plan. We may not understand why we must wait, but we can rest in the assurance that God is working behind the scenes. His restoration may not come in the way we expect, but it will come in a way that is far greater than we could have imagined. In our journey through life, loss is a part of the human experience. It comes in many forms: the death of a loved one, the loss of a job, the ending of a relationship, the disillusion of dreams we once cherished. For many, the pain of loss can feel overwhelming, leaving a deep ache in the heart and a longing for restoration. But even in the midst of our deepest sorrow, we must remember the promise of God. He will restore everything we have lost. God's heart is for restoration. He does not take pleasure in seeing us in pain, and he is not indifferent to our suffering. Instead, he longs to heal our wounds and bring us back into wholeness. It is important to understand that restoration doesn't necessarily mean returning to the exact place we were before the loss. God's restoration is not just about a return, it's about transformation. One of the most challenging aspects of dealing with loss is the sense of helplessness it brings. When we are in pain, we often feel powerless to change our circumstances. We may try to control things, to fix the problems, but the truth is that we cannot do it on our own. We need God's intervention. And the good news is that God is more than willing to step into our brokenness and bring healing. His restoration does not depend on our ability to fix things. It depends on His power and grace. He is the great restorer, and nothing is too difficult for Him. Throughout the Bible, we see many examples of God's restorative power. In the Old Testament, we find the story of the Israelites who were exiled from their land. They had been taken away from the place of promise, and their situation seemed hopeless. But God, in His mercy and grace, brought them back. The Israelites had lost everything, but God brought them back to Himself and restored them to a place of blessing. The story of the Israelites reminds us that no matter how far we may wander, God is always ready to bring us back. Even when we feel like we have lost everything, God is still working on our behalf. He does not leave us in our distress. He is with us, ready to restore us to the place He has prepared for us. And sometimes that restoration is not just about returning to where we were before, but about taking us to a better place, a deeper understanding of His love, and a greater level of peace. In the New Testament, we see the ultimate example of restoration in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Jesus came to restore what was lost in the fall of humanity. Through His sacrifice on the cross, He reconciled us to God, bringing us back into a right relationship with our Creator. His resurrection assures us that even in the face of death and despair, there is hope for restoration. Because Jesus lives, we can face the future with confidence, knowing that He is making all things new. In Him we find the ultimate restoration of our souls. And through Him, we can experience restoration in every area of our lives. Jesus is not only concerned with our eternal destiny, He is concerned with every aspect of our lives. He understands our pain, our loss, and our struggles. He knows the depth of our hearts, and He cares deeply about the brokenness we experience. He came to bind up the brokenhearted, to heal our wounds, and to restore us to wholeness. No matter what we have lost, Jesus offers us the gift of restoration. He is the source of healing, and He will restore our joy, our peace, our hope, and our strength. But restoration requires us to trust God's process. Sometimes the path to restoration is not as quick or as straightforward as we would like. It can be painful and it can take time. During these times, we may feel as though God is distant or that our prayers are unanswered. But we must remember that God is always working, even when we cannot see it. His restoration is not limited to our understanding or our timing. He is doing a deep work in us, a work that will result in something far greater than we could ever imagine. We must also understand that restoration often involves surrender. In our pain, it is easy to become bitter or to hold on to our losses. We may even find ourselves blaming God or asking why He allowed these things to happen. But in order to experience true restoration, we must be willing to release our pain and our hurt to God. We must trust that He knows what is best for us, and that He will use even our suffering for our good and his glory. Surrendering our pain to God does not mean we are giving up. It means we are allowing God to work in us and through us. It is in surrender that we experience true healing. Restoration is not just about healing the brokenness we see on the outside. It is about healing the brokenness within. God desires to restore our hearts, our minds, and our spirits. He wants to transform us into the people he created us to be. This process of transformation takes time, but it is worth the wait. As we walk through the process of restoration, we are becoming more like Christ. We are learning to trust God more deeply, to love more fully, and to live with greater purpose. God is using our losses to refine us, to shape us, and to prepare us for the future he has for us. In the midst of our trials, we must remember that God is not only concerned with what we have lost, but also with what he is doing in us. Sometimes it is through the losses we experience that God brings about the greatest growth. The pain we endure can deepen our faith, refine our character, and draw us closer to him. We may not understand why we are going through what we are going through, but we can trust that God is using it for his glory and our good. He is at work, even when we cannot see it. Restoration is also about renewal. When we lose something, it can feel as though a part of us is gone forever. But the beauty of God's restoration is that he does not simply fill in the gaps. He renews us. He gives us a new heart, a new spirit, and a new sense of purpose. What we thought was lost forever can be restored and even made better than before. Through God's renewal, we become more of the person he intended us to be. Our lives are filled with a new sense of meaning and direction. And we are able to see the world with a fresh perspective. The process of restoration is also a process of redemption. God takes what is broken and makes it beautiful. He takes our failures, our mistakes, and our regrets and turns them into something useful for his kingdom. What we once saw as hopeless, God sees as an opportunity for redemption. Through Christ, we are redeemed from our past, and we are given the chance to live a new life, one that is marked by grace, hope, and restoration. We must also remember that restoration is a journey. It is not a one-time event. It is an ongoing process. God does not simply restore us once and then leave us to fend for ourselves. He continues to work in us day by day, bringing us closer to the person he created us to be. As we continue on this journey, we will face new challenges and new losses, but we can trust that God is always with us, working to restore us. He is faithful to complete the work he has begun in us. In the end, restoration is not just about returning to a former state. It is about becoming more fully who God created us to be. It is about experiencing the fullness of life that comes through Christ. It is about walking in the peace, joy, and hope that only he can give. Through the process of restoration, we come to understand that God is not just interested in fixing our problems. He is interested in making us whole. He wants us to experience his love, his grace, and his power in every area of our lives. As we trust in God's promise of restoration, we can face the future with confidence. No matter what we have lost, no matter how deep our pain, we know that God is at work. He will restore everything we have lost, and he will bring us into a place of blessing and wholeness. His restoration is a work of grace, and it is a work that will continue for as long as we walk this earth. No matter what lies ahead, we can be assured that God is faithful and his restoration is sure. Keep your eyes fixed on him and trust in his perfect plan. As we continue to walk through this journey of restoration, it is important to remember that restoration is not just a promise, but also a process. This process can be painful, but it is in the painful moments that God does some of his deepest work in us. As we let go of what we've lost and surrender it to God, we are able to make room for the new things he wants to do in our lives. Sometimes the very thing that causes us pain becomes the catalyst for our growth. What once seemed like a setback can become the setup for a powerful transformation that will allow us to experience God's restoration in ways we never expected. During this process, we may feel like we are walking through a desert with nothing in sight but emptiness. But even in the desert, God is present. Even when we feel barren, he is working in ways we cannot see. Remember, the desert is not a place of abandonment. It is a place of preparation. It is in the desert that God strengthens us, teaches us to rely on him, and molds us into the people he desires us to be. Just as he led the Israelites through the wilderness, providing for them each day, he will lead us through our own wilderness, step by step, until we reach the place of restoration he has for us. Throughout this journey, we must be patient with ourselves. Restoration takes time, and it is a process that requires us to trust God's timing. It is easy to become discouraged when we don't see immediate results, but we must remember that God's work in our lives is often slow and steady. It's not always about big, dramatic changes, but rather the small daily steps of faith and obedience that bring us closer to the person we are meant to be. Trusting in God's timing means resting in the assurance that he is working, even when we can't see it. And as we walk through the process of restoration, we must also remember the importance of community. While God is the ultimate restorer, he often uses other people in our lives to help us heal. It is through the support, encouragement, and love of others that we are able to navigate the difficult seasons of life. Sometimes restoration comes through the hands of friends, family, and fellow believers who come alongside us, offering their prayers, their encouragement, and their presence. We were never meant to walk this journey alone, and it is in community that we often find the strength and hope we need to continue forward. Lastly, we must hold on to the truth that God's restoration is not just for this life. Yes, God will restore what we have lost here on earth, but the ultimate restoration awaits us in eternity. There will come a day when God will make all things new, when there will be no more sorrow, no more pain, and no more tears. Until that day comes, we can rest in the fact that God is working to restore us, and that his work will be completed in his perfect time. Until then, we hold on to his promises, knowing that everything we've lost will be redeemed, and the restoration we long for will one day be fully realized in his presence. In conclusion, the journey of restoration is not always easy, but it is a journey that holds the promise of renewal, healing, and transformation. No matter what we have lost or the pain we have experienced, God's heart for us is to restore, renew, and bring us into a place of wholeness. Though the process may take time and require patience, we can trust that God is faithfully at work in our lives. His restoration is not just about returning to what we once had, but about moving us forward into something greater, something better, and more aligned with his perfect plan for us. As we navigate through the challenges of life, we must remember that God is always present, even in our darkest moments. He is close to the brokenhearted, ready to comfort, heal, and restore. The losses we experience are not the end of our story, but the beginning of a new chapter where God works in ways beyond. With faith, surrender and trust in his timing, we can be confident that God will restore everything we have lost and that his plans for us are filled with hope, purpose, and abundant life. As we await the fullness of restoration both in this life and the life to come, let us hold fast to the truth that God's restoration is sure. He who began a good work in us will bring it to completion, and his promises never fail. With each step we take, let us walk in the confidence that God is with us, healing our wounds, renewing our spirits, and preparing us for the future he has in store. No matter what we face, we can rest in the assurance that God will restore everything we have lost.